Pierre Burton, Farley Mowat, Stuart McLean, they are a few of the writers who have been awarded the Leacock Medal for Humor. There have been many here in Canada since the award was first given out in 1947. Well, now, local writer Dick Bourgeois Doyle has reviewed all of the winning works in a compilation called What's So Funny? Lessons from Canada's Leacock Medal for Humor Writing. If you haven't picked this up yet, it's pretty great. Each book is chronicled, gives a little summary of the book, and then what he learns or what his opinions on them. So we wanted to bring him in to talk, first of all, because he's part of a fundraiser this weekend on Saturday for Parkinson's, Ottawa Comedy Night for Parkinson's over at Tudor Hall. But we wanted to give him a bit of a twist. Canada Reads launched this week, of course. The whole idea of competing with 5 panelists, trying to rank 5 books. We wanted to see if the same kind of competition could be done with just one panelist, which is why Dick Bourgeois Doyle has agreed to give us a one-man Canada Reads treatment for 5 books that have won the Leacock Medal for Humor. And he's with me now in studio. Hello there.
Hello. Thanks very much, Alan. Should be interesting.
Yes, it should be interesting.
Arguing with myself.
Exactly. We decided to make it even harder. We didn't even let you pick the books. Well, what I did a little bit earlier on Twitter was I just asked listeners to send in years, any years they want, and I started chronicling, and whichever first 5 years got the most votes were the years that you had to choose from for this. So, unfortunately, the first one that got a lot of votes was 1959, and we ran into a bit of a problem there because
it was the only year that the award was not given, and it's not really clear why. The official reason at the time was they didn't receive any nominations, although some people dispute that. In the book, I argue that my kindergarten report card from 1959 should have been. It's pretty humorous.
You could have published that. That would have been an option. So we switched to the next one, which was 1954's "Pardon My Parka" by Joan Walker, which I have to admit I had never heard of before this.
So "Pardon My Parka" is kind of a memoir. Joan Walker was a war bride, and she described in the book her experiences in northern Quebec after the war with her husband, building a bungalow and getting used to being a Canadian.
Okay, so that's book number 1. Book number 2, we came in based on listener votes. They wanted to hear from 1967, which is Needham's Inferno by Richard J. Needham.
Richard J. Needham was a Globe and Mail columnist who was kind of crazy. His columns were just like one long string of silliness, but they were knitted together by a kind of point of view that was political and libertarian, if you like, and it gave it kind of an edge. And I got to admit, Needham is one of the people that made me laugh the most. Okay, all right. So we already have some sense of what might end up at the top there. 1971 was the next year that got a fair number of votes. Children, Wives, and Other Wildlife by Robert Thomas Allen. So Robert Thomas Allen was actually a gigantic figure in his day in this world of humorous writing. His name carried a lot of weight with magazines. Roy McGregor, who I interviewed for my book, is a big fan of his and knew him personally. And he won it, Robert Thomas Allen won it 2 times, once in the 50s and then this book in 1971. And this one in 71, I would argue, is a step above the one in the 1950s.
Okay.
And it does, in spite of its sort of sexist-sounding title, it actually is a kind of an enlightened perspective on our world.
I also just want to comment at this point that Dick is doing all of this with no notes. He's not reading anything at this point. He is just going off the top of his head on each of these books.
Very Unlike these youngsters on
yeah, that's right. Not
Canada
this Canada Reads.
All the preparation.
He is just
whippersnappers
going through this. The next year that got a lot of votes, we had both 1971 and 1973, which was Saturday Night at the Bagel Factory by Donald Bell.
So Donald Bell was a newspaper reporter and columnist in Montreal. I think he made most of his bread and butter working for the Gazette, but he did write for some magazines. And Saturday Night at the Bagel Factory is a collection of personality profiles, but not the kind we think of today when we think of Entertainment Weekly and celebrity type of profiles. They were profiles of ordinary people on the street in Montreal in the early 1970s.
Okay, and the last one that we got, based on votes of listeners, 1986, which the winner that year was No Axe Too Small to Grind by Joey Slinger.
So Joey Slinger is, he's still an active writer, but he is retired officially from the Toronto Star columnist for many, many years, and he had quite a sense of humor. And I actually, when I came to his book, I wasn't really sure I knew him as a columnist. I didn't know if I'd see anything particularly out of the norm in his contribution to the Leacock pantheon here, but he's probably the writer I would go to most often for models of satire. And for, like, he wrote this thing about the Rosedale bus with its chandeliers and its Olympic-sized swimming pool and pulling away from the station with the orchestra playing. And it was all just... Anyways, you know Rosedale.
Yeah. Okay, so these are the 5 that we're going to work with here. And you're weighing these all out in your mind as we speak. What would be, so Pardon My Parka, Joan Walker, Needham's Inferno, Richard J. Needham, Children, Wives, and Other Wildlife by Robert Thomas Allen, Saturday Night at the Bagel Factory by Donald Bell, and No Axe Too Small to Grind by Joey Slinger. What's the first one you'd vote out? What is your least favorite of them?
Well, it won't come as a shock to anyone who's read the book, but Pardon My Parka, in spite of the fact that I think Joan Walker was probably a really pleasant person, she was quite bubbly and effusive and very self-deprecating. And this is the lesson I learned from her book, is that there is a limit to what you can get away with framing things with self-deprecation, because sprinkled throughout her book are some racist comments that just sting, and you can't shake them, and you know it was a different time.
I was going to say, is it a product of it being 1955?
It might be
54,
a part. I think it is a part of that, but when you juxtapose it with what I said, like things like, you know, the bubbliness and the self-deprecation, it seems the other stuff seems kind of insincere. So I'm sure the late Joan Walker might forgive me if I'm projecting too much on that, but that would be the first one.
You didn't find it funny?
Yeah, I learned from all the books, Alan.
How diplomatic of you. Okay, what's the next one you'd vote out?
Well, I have a little more difficulty with the next rung. Maybe I'll just take them in chronological order, if you don't mind.
No. You choose whichever one you feel would be the next to go.
I'll pretend I have a bias against age and go in chronological order, because in spite of what I said about Needham's Inferno making me laugh, and as you know in the book, I correlate it with a lot of personal experiences. When I was in high school, Needham actually came to one of the local, not my high school, the local one, he was in Whitby, and gave a speech and told all the students that they should ignore all laws to do with sex, liquor, gambling, because they're a libertarian guy. And the next day, the students staged a protest in Whitby. It's 1967. And so I can't help it. That image influences my perception and makes me laugh every time. But why I would...
It's not always the student protest you're expecting. Yeah, okay.
And we all started reading the Golden Mail. The reason I would cut him off the list, though, is about halfway through this book, he switches into a whole different kind of format. And you know, in this... Canada Laughs competition.
Yes. Oh, good. You come up with a title already. We're like 5 minutes in.
It's the inaugural
good.
occasion. I would save our Stardust for another book, just because it lacks that coherency. And although part of the delight is the incoherency, that's my rationale there.
All right.
And the same reason I would eliminate Robert Thomas Allen, in spite of the fact that each one of his essays are really insightful and actually kind of helpful to me, because this is the book that mused most about how humor is so personal, and it's linked to your own personal framework and your own personal experiences in that. And so it was kind of an important reference for me, but it is a grab bag, and it doesn't have that strong fiber that I'm sure you and I would want to assign to the winning book. To the winning one.
All right, so we're down to 2 here. We've got 1986's No Axe Too Small.
I might give you a hint to the final one by jumping to 1986.
So that's the next one we're voting out?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyways, Joey Slinger, again, great. And maybe, you know, if we wanted excellence in literary humor, we would look for some coherent whole that's both funny, great in the writing, and sort of touches us and makes us think differently. Slinger did that, and he was very professional, and you can learn a lot from him if you want to be a writer of any kind. And in fact, in this book, there's an essay on how to write that's really, I think it's a summary of a speech he gave to some students that's really kind of instructive. But because of that exigence that I just described, I think he would be the last one before the final.
So the winner is...
So in this particular subset, I think there might be a few others I place higher in the whole 67, but in this subset, I think Saturday Night at the Bagel Factory by Don Bell is really something that warrants people reading again and again. As I described, he talks about, like, it's not just like the superstars. It's the street people, the panhandlers, the people that go to the wrestling matches at the old Paul Sauvé Arena, and the different subcultures in Montreal. He was a product of the Jewish community, but also he looked at the Delphi pool room in the Greek neighborhood, and there was Aboriginal parts of Montreal looked at in the lacrosse stories. And there's a certain underlying kind of respect for humanity and sensitivity for the dignity of people that really is kind of something that we could all learn from. And I go back to Montreal, and I imagine at the corner of Peel and St. Catharines, and I always go back to the bagel factory at Saint-Viateur and think about the characters from Saturday Night at the Bagel Factory, and also eat bagels.
But definitely, obviously, Donald Bell's book has reigned with you. That was brilliant, by the way. Dick Bourgeois-Doyle, excellent one-man Canada reads, very impressive. So if I
might argue with myself after I leave.
Yeah, why did you say that about so-and-so? If anybody wants to argue, all in a day at cbc.ca. But Dick is the author of What's So Funny? Lessons from Canada's Leacock Medal for Humor Writing. He summarizes each, but as you can hear, he knows everything about each of those books from 1947 up to the present. He's launching the book on Saturday at the Comedy Night for Parkinson's at Tudor Hall. What time does it get going? 7:30,
but you better buy your tickets online at www.parkinsons.ca. And thanks for that plug. It's a great way to break the winter, but also a great cause.
Okay, so it's 7:30 Saturday night, Comedy Night for Parkinson's at Tudor Hall. Once again, www.parkinsons.ca. Dick Bourgeois-Doyle, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.